Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the afternoon of Black Hat Day 1 here in Mandalay Bay C&D for the mini summit on cyber insurance. Just some quick housekeeping notes to please remember to stop by the business hall at some time during your visit here at Black Hat. That is in Mandalay Bay Oceanside and Shoreline ballrooms on this floor. The Black Hat Arsenal is also in the business hall on level 2. And the Pony Awards are tonight in Lagoon JK&L, starting at 6:30. Finally, please do remember to put your phone on vibrate or silent. We don't need to hear your ringtone. I'm sure it's lovely. With that, I'm going to bring Jeremiah Grossman up onto the stage to introduce the summit for you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Cyber Insurance Summit. It's the first time I've ever done something like this. I've been coming to Black Hat since 2002, so usually bringing all technical content and things like that. So bringing a subject like cyber insurance seems really out of place. But how this came about was in 2016, I gave a controversial talk on cyber insurance and security warranties. So I saw where insurance was moving into our space. And after talking with a lot of people, I thought it was going to have a profound impact on every single one of us, on every single thing that we do in the entire industry. And I didn't know a lot about it. And I wanted to learn all about it, especially if it's going to affect our industry. So I started hosting the cyber insurance breakfast in the morning on Wednesday at Black Hat, and people came, and then more people came. And frankly, it got too big for a breakfast. And so I talked with the Black Hat organizers and said, because there was a lot of demand for this, and then you all showed up here to help make this successful for us. So thank you very much for that, for coming. I know the subject is controversial. A lot of people have concerns, very valid concerns about insurance invading our space. Bring your questions to us. We have 3 of the best speakers we could possibly get for us here. I want to introduce them and not waste any more time. I'm going to call up in a minute. Jeffrey Smith will be our first speaker. So we're going to have 3 presentations separated by a 20-minute gap. They'll build in some time for questions at the end of the presentations. If that's not enough time, these guys will be around to answer more questions in the hallway track and things like that. So please do ask questions. That's what we're here for. We're here to learn. So the first gentleman I'm going to call up to the stage now is quite literally my go-to cyber insurance broker. He's been doing insurance for 15, 20 years, something like that, a long, long time, and now has moved into cyber. So he gets the broker perspective on how to think about these particular things. So we're very fortunate to have him. The second speaker, which will come up in a second, would be Jake Coons. He's quite literally one of us. He's been in InfoSec a long, long time. He's going to show you how cyber insurance fits and impacts your cybersecurity program in general. And then following that, we are going to have Matt Prevost, pronouncing it correctly? He's from Chubb. He's an actual underwriter, an actual carrier who writes these policies for a living, and is one of the biggest, if not the biggest carrier in this space that we have. So we're very fortunate to have these people here to teach us the things that they know. So with that, I'm going to have Jeffrey come on stage and do a 101 talk for us. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So how long y'all been doing this, the Black Hat thing, Jer? So what's that, going on 20 years? And you just finally thought to invite the insurance guys, right? So it's not lost to me that our arrival coincides with the insect invasion. I'll try not to read too much into that. Jer, thank you, and thank you to Black Hat for giving us this great opportunity to speak to you and introduce cyber insurance to you. I want to start with some observations. I first came to Black Hat 3 years ago, and I immediately noticed some really striking differences between security world and the insurance universe. First of all, your stories are absolutely fascinating to me. I mean, while I was reading insurance policies and reviewing claims and developing loss scenarios, you guys were hacking into AOL chat rooms, climbing telephone poles to eavesdrop on your neighbors' conversations. All the while, who knew? A lot more fun than me, and I find the folks I've met here a lot more interesting than the folks I encounter every day in insurance. It's a low bar. So even when I look at the attendee list, here I see PhDs, I see data scientists, I see mathematicians, I saw a dude from the CIA. There are unicorns here. We certainly don't have unicorns in insurance. We don't have Sherpas. We don't have evangelists. And we sure don't have a thought capitalist. I kid you not, I had one guy at one of these shows introduce me to him. He handed me a card, and it said thought capitalist. I didn't know what it was. I figured he was just stoned. You guys got cool nicknames, right? Death Veggie and Mudge and Arsnake. We don't have any cool nicknames in our space. I mean, who'd you rather have a beer with, Death Veggie or Bob the Casualty Actuary? Pretty simple choice. We have no cool clubs. You guys have what is it? Cult of the Dead Cow. We have PLUS, Professional Liability Underwriting Society. And you know what we do at our conventions? I mean, you guys break things at your conventions. You know, you guys like, one of the first invites I got was from Jeremiah for his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Smackdown. So you guys break things, you break each other, right? And then you go over to DEF CON and you hack everything that's got a chip in it. It's really cool. It's really cool. At our conventions, guess what we do? We drink. And we drink a lot. So the other thing I noticed, differences, the other thing I noticed was that, particularly walking around the expo floor, was that the way we do things, the way we pitch our products, is we put everything through, I'll say, the actualizer. So we feed a bunch of data into the actuary department, and then they spit out rates for us. And then we pitch it based upon, hey, here's your exposure, blah. You guys use an awfulizer. Seriously, you guys use an awfulizer. You guys use sex, and you guys use return on investment, which I don't quite understand how it works. Who knew that protecting your endpoints could be so sexy? Not me. All joking aside, I love this stuff. I love cyber insurance. It's like the coolest thing to come around the insurance space, like in forever, and I'm really happy to be here. When I first got into cyber insurance, the product I found was poorly portrayed, both in utility and in content. And the typical sell situation would be a fire insurance or a property casualty insurance agent, because that's where we distribute product, sitting with the CFO of a large company, saying to the CFO, hey, here's your fire insurance renewal. We did a great job. And oh, by the way, my boss said, I got to show you this other thing. What is it? It's called cyber insurance. What's my exposure and how much does it cost? The agents don't understand this stuff. So the response would be Anthem, Target, Home Depot, OMB. Did you see 60 Minutes? And the CFO's not going to buy. The CFOs can't relate to that. So there was no sell, there was no traction, and more importantly, that business was not any better prepared or any better protected from a cyber risk than they were before he walked in the door. So in terms of other insurance, the way other insurance is underwritten, as I mentioned before, we actualize everything. So on any given risk, let's say it's a workers' compensation risk. On large companies, we may have 100,000 claim files for that company to develop and come up with rates. And so we end up with a really tight rate with that many losses. And on top of that, actually, the actuaries will have access to millions of files through aggregators. And they further use that to develop claims. So good examples, let's talk about a large nursing home chain. I can tell you that for every $100 of payroll, you're going to pay $2 in claims. Further, I can tell you you're going to have 110 to 115 claims a year. I can tell you that 80% of your claims are going to be under $1,500. I can tell you 50% or 60% of your severity, meaning the aggregate claims payouts, are going to be due to back strains. I can tell you that the other 20% is going to be due, or 40% is going to be due to needle sticks. I can tell you all this when we underwrite a workers' comp risk. I can also tell you in a nursing home risk, If you use mechanical lifts to lift residents instead of lifting them individually, we can cut your rate by 45% because we have data on that. That's not the case in cyber insurance because it's a new and evolving product. We don't have credible actuarial data. Claims are starting to happen. We're going to talk about that in detail, but we don't have that. And so why did I come to Black Hat? I came to Black Hat the first time 3 years ago. I think I mentioned that. And the idea was I wanted to be able to better position our product. So I wanted to be able to give my agent risk-specific stuff so that he could better connect with the CFO and better explain his exposures, maybe provide some recommendations. And so the CFO would actually see the value proposition, and we'd close more deals. I had the pleasure of meeting Jeremiah Grossman and a guy named Robert Hansen. And they, oddly enough, were fascinated with insurance. Jeremiah had been in the warranty space for a while. And they agreed to be the advisors for my company. So shortly thereafter, I get a submission on my desk. Somebody wanted a quote, a cyber quote. And it was for a travel tech company, a technology company that did APIs. I didn't really understand the risk, so I called Robert. I said, Robert, can you take a look at this for me? I don't understand it. Tell me what you find out. So, sorry, I lost my slides. No worries. We're back. Sorry about that. Anyhow, so I tell Robert that, you know, this agent had been trying to win this account for 3 years, and he was trying to win the whole, you know, he wanted to win the whole business insurance portfolio for this company. And he was really frustrated because this account, not only did they not buy cyber insurance, they didn't buy technology, errors and omissions insurance. And this was a $50, $60 million company, so it's pretty significant. So Robert calls me and says, Jeffrey, don't write this one with your money. And I said, well, Robert, first, I don't write anything with my money. And second, send me an email, tell me what's up with it. So Robert, this is the email I get from Robert. Robert says, there's a lot wrong with this company, dude. Laugh out loud. No HTTPS. We talked about that before, but on key forums, I'm amazed their customers haven't complained. Chrome will actually block this stuff now, not to mention Google will degrade their page rank. That's possibly a good thing from a security perspective, actually. Less people will find and hack them. And then he talks about the 1Password. More importantly, what was crazy is that Robert took me to one of the landing pages for this company. It was actually the page where their customers log in. And he drew my attention to the bottom, and there are a bunch of Chinese symbols in a link at the bottom of the page, and I clicked on it, and it took me to the Chinese government. It looked like a Chinese government website. So I called the agent, and I said, get the CEO and CFO on the phone. So we get them on the phone, and my first question is, so are you guys arranging travel for the Chinese government? And there's dead silence. And then the response was kind of like, what you talking about, Willis? And so to make a long story short, they called people like you. We cleaned up the risk. And you know, the agent, we put together a product for them that worked for them, Tech E&O and a cyber policy, and they're still a customer today. The key takeaways today, ideally, what I'd like for you to walk away with is some understanding of cyber insurance and how it works. And you know, not unlike your space, we get beat up a lot. I'm going to talk about some common ground. I mean, we're all in the same business, I believe. What the value proposition is, what's included. We're going to talk a little bit about calculating claim costs as we see them. And then a little bit on market intel, because these guys are going to cover that and a lot of these in more detail in the upcoming sessions. So, do you guys get this a lot? Cyber insurance or InfoSec, it's scary and confusing, but at least it's boring. And that's not an uncommon sort of response. So, CFOs say, oh my God, I saw something in the news, or one of my pals got, hacked. Get out here, come talk to us about that insurance stuff. And then we get out there and they're like, 10 minutes and they're going, this is confusing, and now I just want you to leave. So we're kind of in the same boat in that respect. So I think some of y'all recognize these guys. It's like, last time I saw you, I gave you more money for security. You've been hacked. So this slide to me is about efficacy. We both share the problem of perception of the efficacy of our products. And that's a big common thread. And so basically we're in the same business. So what's the value proposition of cyber insurance? First is an outside perspective. So we'll talk a little bit about evolving services and front-end evaluation services in a second, but it's a fresh look under the hood and possibly be a stamp of approval or identify some things that maybe can improve at the risk. Then you're talking about immediate support. So the question here is, and this is probably my view, one of the most valuable aspect of these products and what differentiates them from other insurance products, is that who are you going to call? Do you know PR people or lawyers who specialize in cyber response? Do you have them on your speed dial? Comes with the product. All these people are vetted. Financial recovery, reputation management, lost income or downtime, and then getting back to business. So the product will also deal with the litigation that you may face after the fact, work with you on repairing any reputational issue. What is it? It's an insurance contract. It's like any other insurance contract. It looks like every other insurance contract and is written like most other insurance contracts. The product is new, relatively speaking. The product is either probably 50% of the market. The insurance is provided in other insurance. So like it could be a business owner's policy, it could be a crime policy, you could have riders, malpractice policy. It's not uncommon for them to have cyber insurance riders. The problem with these riders is that the coverage is short, so the limits are typically really short, like $100,000, $250,000, and the coverage kind of sucks. So the product is, the standalone market, which we play in, is growing. So, it's at some point in the next few years, it's going to surpass the blended market. And I think at some point in time, cyber insurance is going to be part of any standard business insurance portfolio, along with property and workers' comp and general liability. Now, it's distributed primarily through retail insurance agents, property and casualty agents. But we think there's some ways to distribute what we call excess insurance capacity. That means we have more oranges to sell than people buying, through security warranties and distribute through the MSSP channel. We'll talk about that. So security product warranties, less than 1% of the security software vendors buy or actually stand behind their product in any sort of form or fashion. A lot of them, particularly the smaller ones who have great products, they may not have adequate errors and omissions or professional liability insurance to cover them, because if they're not warranting their product, if your antivirus doesn't work, you can't take it back to the man who sold it to you and said, here, give me my money back and make me whole. You have to sue them to get whole, and that's what a technology errors and omissions insurance policy does. Now, for more information on the warranties, we set up a website and we track them. So you can go to the website, securitywarranties.com, and check it out. In terms of MSSP distributed insurance, this is a fascinating, I think, opportunity, because we've looked at situations where MSSPs came to us and said, hey, we think we can close more deals if we embed cyber insurance in one of our subscriptions. And so we underwrite these. And a good example is we had one vendor come to us and said, hey, all of our gold subscriptions, we want to include some cyber insurance. And they told me the price point. And so we came up with a product that was, I can't remember, it was $250,000 or $500,000 worth of insurance that would be, baked in the product, baked into their subscription. And I think the price was like under $300 a year for that insurance. So it's like, 90% of travel insurance is sold through travel agents because they understand the risk. So I think there's a great opportunity for this to be offered as a holistic solution, or it can be an opportunity for MSSPs to say, hey, we stand behind our product. So the product offering is basically three parts. There's a first-party coverage, which is basically pay you back for your stuff, your direct cost in the event of a breach. There's third-party coverage, which is like liability costs. That's lawyers. That's when the lawyers get involved, when somebody brings an action against you. And I think the most exciting aspect of the program, or the product today, is the evolution of the security products that are offered in some of these, in the new insurance contracts over the last, I guess, 2 or 3 years. It's really happening quickly. So first part is your direct expenses. So you got event response, cybercrime, coverage for downtime, and then other stuff. So your event response, when you have a claim, you'll call a breach coach, or a lot of instances now, the first responder could be a security engineer. So the first responder, they'll get a lawyer involved pretty quick. Now the lawyer's job is to tell you about what state notifications, what statutes you're responsible for, what obligations you have to notify, if you got a HIPAA issue, that sort of thing. They bring the forensics people in, public relations people will get started. They'll work up the notification. If they have to send out letters, they'll send out the letters. They provide credit monitoring as part of these programs. Cybercrime, big deal. Extortion, ransomware. I think, and Matt will talk more to this, but the two claims we're seeing with increasing frequency, ransomware is not too surprising, but the wire transfer fraud claims we're paying are trending in a bad direction. There's also phishing, coverage for phishing, like third-party phishing. Some of them call it client phishing, where the client gets phished by somebody who looks like you and they send money somewhere. Telecom fraud. In terms of downtime, in the insurance industry, we call this business interruption. So the idea is to replace your income and any expenses that continue during a downtime. Now, there are different triggers. It depends on the trigger. So the most common trigger is a cyber event or a breach that shuts you down, shuts you out of your system, or your data that's held in a third-party system. And that's called dependent business interruption. Then there's one called, there's a business interruption claim that's driven by system interruption, where it's not a cyber event, but there's an unexpected system interruption that costs you money. Now, they'll cover system interruption, but you got a lot of times, with the system interruption, sometimes you need to shut your system down when a breach happens for a period of time, and they'll pick that up too as long as you call and tell them what you're going to do. Other stuff, hardware. We had a claim, it was about 6 months ago. It was a regional healthcare system, and they had a big breach. Turns out that they didn't pay the ransom because they realized in the process that their whole systems need to be rebuilt, and all their servers were bricked. So the policy replaced 200 servers, paid for downtime. Court attendance, reward expenses, some little sexy bells and whistles, picks up, crypto jacking. Some of them will include expenses for claims preparation, which is forensic accountants and stuff to come in and calculate what your business interruption loss is. Okay, resolving third-party claims. First-party claims are probably, I'm told, 80% or so. But when you get sued, you get sued. So you have security, privacy, liability. So that's defense and damages. Now, I say liability assumed under contract. That's a sticky wicket. But sometimes you'll assume liability for others in a contract. As long as they know about it, you can figure out a way to get it covered. Malware transmission, unauthorized release of PHI or PII. I will tell you a quick anecdote. The multimedia liability coverage picks up any unauthorized disclosure. So we had another healthcare, there's a lot of claims in healthcare space. We had another healthcare customer who One of the employees, it's a small town, and one of the employees went out, was drinking beers with his buddy, and decided to share information on the medical file of one of their patients. Well, it's a small town, so this woman found out, and she brought an action against him. And the policy picked up defense and damages because it picks up any liability for unauthorized release of privileged information. Regulatory defense and penalties, that's a big deal, especially with GDPR. PCI DSS, assessments, fines, card reissuance expenses, and then multimedia liability. Electronic or written, libel, slander, defamation, infringement on copyrights, and the like. Now, this is where things are really happening quickly. Traditionally, the insurance industry's solution to every problem is to give you an insurance policy and an 800 number, right? And early on, that's what this policy did. It did provide the services, a lot of the services. But as time's going by, you're starting to see an evolution in terms of more services. Now, this is a company called Coalition. They got a really interesting prop. First of all, they actually include, and they write companies under $500 million, but they actually include apps. They do a risk assessment up front. They include apps that hopefully will at least work to keep the insured safe during the policy period. Claim comes in. They get the experts involved. Then after, they work to mitigate your claim after the fact with public relations and what have you. So this is the trend in our space, is they're starting to include security tools, a lot of the tools that you guys use to assess risk. And so getting back to the insurance agent, this time the insurance agent goes out and sits with the CFO and says, hey, we did an assessment. We found you have a remote, you're using an unprotected remote desktop protocol. You've got some servers that aren't behind firewalls. You've got some patching issues and the like. So it actually gives the agent something tangible to speak to the insured about. So maybe it's better to understand these in terms of the timeline of a claim. So you have the breach, then you have the breach coach, the forensics folks jump in. Claims, they evaluate the claim's legitimacy. They'll get involved with they'll identify what regulatory and legal issues you have, and then they'll engage the other resources. Then in the near term crisis, they'll notify who needs to be notified. They'll provide the credit monitoring. The data recovery comes into play. And then the long-term consequences, this is where your downtime comes into play, and lawsuits. And again, the evolving area is the mitigation tools and consultation. So most of the carriers have some form of training. Originally, just like you get online, you're watching videos. Now there's some more interactive training that they're including in their policy up to a certain threshold. They're offering phishing simulations, domain protection, network monitoring, patch monitoring, password apps, and then security folks and legal people are on call if you have questions during the policy period. How much does a claim cost? How much insurance do we need? So I'm going to show you two scenarios. This scenario is, both scenarios are going to use 1.5 million files. So this scenario was just PII. There was a hack. They are not in California. They've not had a hack recently. We figured that the system itself was probably of average complexity. It'd make regional news, and the security controls were average. Now, we pegged this claim at about $350, $4 per file. Now, a note about information that you hear in our space. Have any of y'all heard 65% of small businesses go out of business after a hack? Has anybody heard that stat? Well, it's good because it's bullshit. And I say that, they told me to watch my language. I say that because even the source, the alleged source, came out and said that's not true. There's no data to support that. Now, have we seen companies small companies go down? Yeah, we saw a company go down in the recent Quest Lab hack. In Quest Labs, they didn't get hacked directly. They had engaged a billing vendor, which most of these labs do. The billing vendor engaged a really small collections agent. The collection agent got hacked, and they noodled their way in. The collection agent was maybe a $200 correct me, I'm not sure this is 100% accurate, but I think maybe they had 100, 150 employees. Filed for bankruptcy immediately. I don't know if they had insurance or not. The other data that's out there, I guess the bellwether study is that says, they came out a few years ago and said, hey, it's $300 a file for your health care and get up to $250 a file, those sort of things. I haven't really seen those numbers. I've seen a couple small insureds, really small insureds get hit with under 1,000 files, and they got hammered by HIPAA. So the cost of those files may be $1,500. But I think these numbers are more realistic in terms of what we see. Now, this risk was in California. It was a healthcare concern, and you can see the cost. So this one jumped fivefold, or maybe actually more than closer to sixfold from the prior example. Coverage limitations. So it's important to understand that in an insurance policy, your coverage limitations can come in three areas. Exclusions, but there are also conditions and definitions that can hide, coverage limitations. The thing about exclusions, people think exclusions, oh, they're going to exclude it because they want to or they don't want to pay a claim. There are really a finite number of reasons for an exclusion to be an insurance policy. It's either insured somewhere else, like cyber insurance ain't going to cover workers' comp or property or directors and officers' liability. It's uninsurable, like war, core internet failure, and what have you. Or it's against public policy. We're not going to pick up intentional crimes or acts. We're not going to pick up fines and penalties that are not insurable by law. There's some states that don't allow punitive damages to be insured, for example. And then there are other, if a claim is filed, if a claim occurred or is filed before the policy period, if there are contractual issues that weren't addressed at inception. Betterment means, a theory of insurance, the concept of indemnity means that the concept of insurance is to put you back in the place that you were before a claim, not improve your situation. But there are some caveats. But, if the new software you have to put in is a new version and or the servers, they're new versions and that's required, then the insurance will pay for that. Technology errors and omissions. If you are a tech company, tech E&O is generally included in the cyber or vice versa. Government orders. So now, when you get into conditions and definitions, this I think will be useful to this group, is first of all, don't lie on the application. Okay, just come clean, don't lie on the application because you will not get paid. Now, there's some companies that don't refer to the application as a warranty, just don't lie on the application. Reporting provisions, you have certain duties in the event of a claim and how you report a claim, the timing, how you report a claim, who you report it to. In the event of a claim, I had a claim, it was about a month ago, and it was a small company. They got hacked. They called us. We got security people involved. We did all the things we're supposed to do. And when the forensics people got involved, they got a call. And they said, hey, Brandon and IT wiped the server. They had backups, so they said, hey, this is awesome, we have backups. And for whatever reason, Brandon and IT wiped the server. Well, again, this is another healthcare company, and they have HIPAA obligations. And the forensics, we couldn't go in there and tell them if they had a HIPAA violation or not, because it was gone. So don't do stuff like that. You have retentions and wait periods. Retentions are easy to understand. Wait periods are different. So wait periods refer to the downtime. So you may have an 8-hour downtime retention. After 8 hours downtime, the insurance will respond. The state of the market, and my colleagues here are going to get into a lot more detail. It continues to grow, but there are a lot of challenges. There's a big concern about systemic risks that will knock everybody out of the box. I would say Warren Buffett was recently asked about cyber insurance, and his response was, we're going to write as little of it as possible because I don't understand it. I don't think anybody understands it. In terms of the cyber insurance market, it's evolving. It's super competitive, but it makes up only about 1% of all, business insurance premiums. There are 500, I think Matt was saying over 700 now maybe of insurance actually providing some type of cyber insurance, but they're really only, in my view, only about 20 players who really understand and know how to assess risk. There are two distinct markets. There's an enterprise market, and then there's a small to medium enterprise market. The latter is probably under $500 million, give or take, depending on the market or the insurer. The take-up rates are difficult to measure. There's all different information. It's even difficult for the insurance people, like AM Best, who's a credit rating agency for the insurance industry, to figure that out. But it's under 50% in my opinion. And there's an evolution, as I mentioned earlier, to these insurtechs. And so instead of doing the traditional underwriting, issuing a policy and an 800 number, they actually have platforms where I can go on a platform with one of my carriers. I can put in 6 data points, and in 7 seconds, I get a risk assessment. It's got asset inventory. It's got all the stuff I mentioned earlier before. I get a quotation. I get a specimen policy with all the information in it. I can bind coverage in seconds. And so they're making it a lot easier, and they're adding more security features to the product. So I guess, my message here is that what I've learned is the more we take your stuff and combine it with our stuff, the better outcomes are going to be enjoyed by our customers. So that's all I got. Any questions? Yes.
There was a section where you talked about cyber cover,
Uh-huh.
and then another section where you talked about terrorism and foreign outcomes.
Sure.
And there's kind of a blurry line there.
Yeah.
Like if the point of origin happens to be a country that's at war with another one, does that not matter?
Yeah, so I think I had that asterisk. So the question was crime versus terrorism. And so terrorism coverage can be insured. There's a lot of gray area. I think Matt can probably speak to this more specifically than I can. But terrorism through TRIA can be picked up. The definitions, a lot of the claims you hear about that weren't covered, like the big ones recently that are making all the headlines, a lot of times they didn't buy a standalone cyber insurance policy. They were trying to recover from their property insurance policy. But that is a great question, and it's evolving. What's next? Yes? How about cyber warfare?
Yeah. Like the recent attacks of WannaCry not did some of the insurance being those as extra cyber warfare.
Okay.
And categorize it differently. What's your take on that?
The question was about cyber warfare. Now, under cyber policy, if you get breached, generally there's going to be coverage. If you have a property policy and you get breached through a cyber war, the challenge with this is how do you define cyber war? And again, I'm going to defer to Matt to get into that in a little more detail for you. What's next? Yes, sir.
Kind of twofold question. Number one, when you talk about what's my exposure, how do you communicate to the CFO who helps you kind of understand your exposure? And then secondarily, you talk about underwriting results being strong. I mean, what is the black box that actuaries are putting into the data to determine claim costs or underwriting policies?
Sure. So the question was, in terms of the CFOs who buy this stuff, who do they go to help them assess the risk and explain the risk to? The second question, well, let me talk to the first question. Usually there's an IT person involved, and Jake's going to talk about your role and how you can improve outcomes. So I won't steal, his thunder. But usually there's an IT person. We closed a deal today, and they had an outside IT guy, and that's who they wanted to be the contact. But usually the IT people are the ones that sit and communicate, unless they don't have one. In smaller companies, we get involved and do that. Second question was in terms of the black box. Is there a black box, Matt?
We'll get into that.
Yeah. So there aren't a lot of claims, and so I hate to say it, and Jeremiah said this before, it's a land grab. Everybody feels like they need to be in the space. So it's a land grab. Most companies, in my view, they don't know what they have. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of competition. I think they have a very valuable product that it's evolving. I think the larger you go, when you start getting into large enterprises, they're starting to understand exposures. That's the challenge, is they're not understanding it from a actuarial perspective, because the data is just not there. It's coming, but it's just not there. So they're starting to look into efficacy of certain software tools. Again, the problem though is, unlike static risk like fire or worker slip and falls, this risk evolves. So I'm not so certain that if we have a bunch of actuarial data that it's going to be helpful for sure. I don't think it's going to have the value that, the static risk loss data affords. Yes, sir.
Are there specific controls that you as the industry take to help lower costs? So if you have specific controls in place, you can go to your CFO and say, we have these controls in place, take that to the underwriter, and the underwriter will say, with having these controls, like if you're fire insurance, you have fire alarms, you reduce costs. Are there any controls that you have in the security sector that will address that lower cost for the CFO?
The question was, are there security measures that the CFO needs to know about to generate, I guess, the best, insurance outcome? The answer is yes. And again, I hate to defer to Matt and Jake, but they're going to get into the underwriting, the technical aspects of underwriting. But from my perspective, historically, carriers have sent you this 5 or 10 page app, and you're checking a bunch of boxes that, quite frankly, don't matter. How we get a hard time for, whether we pay or not. Y'all get a hard time because, your antivirus and firewalls, they don't always work. Am I right, Jeremiah? So, yeah. So the top ones that we see, at least in my space, are two-factor authentication, administrative privileges. If you're sending a wire, just pick up the phone and call the person who's getting the wire. So there's some of those that, blocking and tackling that are pretty obvious. But the insurers are getting smarter about that. They're actually, they're running these passive scans now, and they're underwriting based upon those scans. Yes, sir.
When it comes to ransomware, do you have a line in your policies about the ransom itself, paying it? If a couple of local smaller municipalities recently were hit, and they paid out because they said your insurance was going to cover it. It seems like an odd thing to be covered for.
So I think the question was, about ransom coverage, and if I heard you correctly, what I think I heard you say is how do they make the decision as to whether...
Right, you physically cover paying the ransom? Oh,
yeah. No, the ransom payments and the negotiations and the experts and all that are included in the policy. And what's interesting about those two claims is the amount. Because heretofore, the amounts were insane, right? I lived in Atlanta, so we had Jackson County. Well, we had Atlanta, right? And we had Jackson County, Georgia. Under 50,000 population, paid $400,000. You had the two towns in Florida paid $400,000 and $600,000. They're insured. And how they make decisions, it's funny because a lot of companies are they just don't want to pay. They'll get the FBI in there and they'll say, we recommend you don't pay. The problem is, if you have a backup and they didn't get to that too, that can be a great decision. But a lot of times that's not there. And as you guys know, the efficacy of a lot of systems out there leave a lot to be desired. Yeah. Okay. I think that's about it for questions. I think I'm out of time. I'm going to be headed to a media room, so if you guys got more questions, I'm happy to answer them. And hey, I really appreciate your time. It's been fun being here.